For more of this kind of content, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. He laughed, and the court recoiled. The ashen crown rose from crimson cushions and spoke in ritual cadence, each syllable lacquered with centuries of assumed supremacy. Relics, the chancellor said, and the word slicked over the chamber like oil. Statists recorded it. A pageant of banners answered in slow wind. Court philosophers nodded as if proof had been delivered. They had rehearsed this moment for generations. On the high dais, maps flashed, 12 contested systems, 36 tributary worlds, the Empire's 11 dreadnoughts in ceremonial configuration. Numbers were currency. Ceremony made them absolute. Reduced to ink on glass, humanity's single envoy was a joke. The archivist whispered synoptic histories, centuries of contact protocols the Empire believed unbroken, until the general banged his gauntlet and declared war as if reading a ledger entry. The envoy entered alone. No armor, no retinue, a plain coat, a paper bundle clutched under one hand. Silence widened to a brittle thing. Court photographers leaned forward like vultures. The chancellor expected a plea. The general expected panic. The chancellor expected posture. The general expected spectacle. Instead, the envoy smiled. A small human smile. It was an inappropriate motion, a private thing in public. The joke snapped. The smile disarmed more than any weapon. He laughed. A laugh. One sound. It unpicked the ceremony's seams. Cameras hesitated. Servitors stilled. The chancellor's mouth lost its practiced shape. Diplomatic aides scrambled counters. A screen filled with the figure 1. One envoy. Another screen listed 19 in small type. 19 anomalies cataloged near human space. Anomalies dismissed as childish curiosities. The general's eyes flicked to the readouts. In the momentary confusion, protocol suggested seizure, arrest, or baited courtesy. War had been declared. Law demanded spectacle. The envoy unfolded the newspaper. Paper, printed ink. The motion was ordinary. The effect was not. The paper's headlines spoke a date, but no threat. It framed the room with the ordinary again, the domestic intruding on the divine. Protocol officers could not compute why a civilized being would produce something so banal in the presence of empire. The chancellor barked a command. Brass moved. A herald recited the formal accusation, and the gallery rose in collective breath. The general signaled for a pre-arranged volley ritual. Sensors hummed. 42 seconds of measured time had already been set between declaration and mobilization in the War Office's thinking, a disciplined cadence for protocol and display. The laugh hung longer than 42 seconds. That length forced a choice. The court could proceed with ceremony and blood, or it could notice the fissures the laugh had revealed, the arrogance, the blind faith in ritual, the brittle reliance on numbers as sanctification. For a court bred to make decisions from the safety of script, an unexpected human sound was a variable without precedent. Some favored immediate retribution. Others wanted to salvage face. The chancellor cleared his throat, very small. The envoy folded the paper again, methodical, unhurried, a tiny practiced motion. A messenger whispered of 19 dark points in orbit. Someone mentioned preparations cloaked for decades. The general's jaw tightened. The chamber readied its ritual, but the envoy's calm had seeded doubt. That doubt would bloom once mobilization began. The court's certainty had cracked. Movement would follow, soon enough. He did not bow when ordered. The command rolled across the chamber like a blast wave of authority, yet the envoy stood as if measuring a quiet morning. The chancellor's gauntleted gesture signaled submission as a foregone conclusion, but the envoy merely breathed, shifted the folded newspaper under one arm, and let the silence stretch until it thinned to a razor's edge. "I decline," he said. 2 words, clean, unadorned. They struck harder than any shouted defiance. Court scribes hesitated mid-stroke. The general's visor dimmed as tactical overlays recalculated probabilities, expecting panic, supplication, anything except a soft refusal framed in calm breath. Above the planet, 19 stealth fleets heard the declaration and moved. The first logistic bloom ignited at second 0, wideband vacuum bursts signaling preloaded contingencies. Cargo arrays the size of cities unfolded like metallic petals. Automated tenders snapped from hibernation into disciplined motion. Every ship had waited years for a day the Empire believed it alone could choose. The fleets didn't surge from fear. They moved because the calendar told them to. Below, the Chancellor advanced a step. "You stand before the court of ashen crowns. Your species will accept terms, or it will be processed." The envoy raised an eyebrow, the gesture small but exact. "Humanity does not process populations." His voice stayed steady, almost gentle. "We negotiate, we prepare, and we respond." Another signal rippled across orbit. 19 carrier groups shed their stealth baffles in synchronized waves. Thin veils of refracted light collapsing to reveal hulls marked only with quiet hazard stripes. No grand banners, no ceremonial glare, just the architecture of readiness. A single line blinked on the general's command slate. 19 assets, active. Then a second. Assets preloaded, 100%, logistical integrity. The general's pulse spiked. "Your vessels have no authorization to maneuver in Imperial orbit," the Chancellor snapped. "They are not maneuvering," the envoy replied. "They are awakening." A stinger line cut the room like wire. Preparation is its own deterrent. The court stiffened as if struck. The envoy did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. His composure was an indictment of the Empire's ritual bravado. 1 envoy, 19 fleets, 2 silent facts threading themselves into every mind present. In orbit, fuel lines linked in lattices. Habitat blocks spun up gravity bands. Tactical wings aligned into loose, non-threatening ellipses. Posture without escalation. Readiness without aggression. The logistics were the message. If war came, humanity would not scramble. It would simply activate. "Your refusal constitutes rebellion," the Chancellor said, trying to reclaim altitude. "Defiance will be corrected." "Then correct the assumption," the envoy answered. "We come to prevent bloodshed, not bend under ceremony." Another punchline, quiet but sharp. "Power isn't proven by volume." Data screens flickered. Imperial analysts reported unusual traffic along outer orbital strata. 19 synchronized signatures, all silent, all disciplined. No weapon locks, no threats. Just an unmistakable display of capacity the Empire had never bothered to imagine. The envoy folded his paper once more, careful, deliberate. "Your declaration has been heard," he said. "Humanity will respond proportionally and with restraint." Restraint, spoken in the face of force, landed with more weight than any vow of vengeance. The court sensed the shift. Ceremony no longer dictated the moment. Reality did. In orbit, the 19th Fleet completed its alignment, and the first tenders began prepping humanitarian modules, because even under threat, humanity planned for aftermaths, not just victories. The envoy met the general's stare without challenge, only clarity. "We refuse submission," he said softly, "but we do not refuse responsibility." And with that, momentum tilted toward the next inevitability. He felt the moment the Empire chose force. It came not as a shout, but as the brittle click of a ceremonial relay, one sound swallowed by the vast chamber, yet unmistakable to anyone who understood how empires masked fear. The general lowered his gauntlet, and the order rippled up through armatures, projectors, and orbit-linked batteries that had waited centuries to prove their power. "Fire," the Chancellor commanded. The Envoy did not move. High above the capital, the opening volley erupted. 11 orbital emplacements locking onto the 19 human signatures with all the confidence of a power convinced history obeyed it. Particle spears tore across vacuum, converging on the nearest human carrier in a burn bright enough to silhouette the planet's clouds. 42 seconds. That was the window the Empire believed they controlled. The rigid sequence from declaration to annihilation, a cadence carved into doctrine. 42 seconds for dominance, 42 seconds for submission. The first impact hit at second 3. It was a direct strike, a perfect solution. Imperial tacticians leaned forward, expecting a flare of hull rupture, escape pods scattering, maybe a crew's final broadcast. Instead, the carrier's surface rippled once, like water under a stone. Then the beam vanished, dissipated, absorbed, rendered harmless with 97% efficiency. The Envoy watched the silent readouts bloom across the court's main display. "Your opening shot has been contained," he said, simply stating a fact. Somewhere in the gallery, someone whispered a forbidden phrase, "Impossible." The second volley struck at second 9. Multiple beams, higher amplitude, overlapping frequencies, designed to overwhelm any known shield geometry. Again, the carrier absorbed them, the energy spilling across its layered skin like rain on slate. Each strike registered only as thermal bloom, dissipated across deep sinks engineered for exactly this moment. A stinger line fell into the silence. Energy obeys physics, not ceremony. The general barked for escalation. Turrets realigned. Orbital lances spat concentrated fire. The impacts came in rapid succession now, each one painting the carrier in shimmering distortion. Imperial observers saw no cracks, no destabilization, not even evasive maneuvers. The human ship didn't bother to move. By second 20, 3 more carriers exposed their surfaces deliberately, allowing the beams to hit. Each recorded the dissipation metrics and transmitted them, calm, clinical packets of telemetry that undercut the Empire's centuries of doctrine in a handful of digits. "Your weapons," the Envoy said, "have been anticipated." The Chancellor's voice frayed. "You cannot ignore Imperial fire." "We're not ignoring it," the Envoy replied. "We're absorbing it so no one dies unnecessarily." Restraint, spoken aloud, unsettled the court more than any counterattack could. In the Empire's worldview, mercy followed victory, not preceded it. Yet here the humans stood, absorbing blows without reply, offering a window for the Empire to reconsider its path before escalation turned irreversible. At second 36, the Empire launched its final coordinated burst, a full-spectrum strike meant for system-wide deterrence. It washed over the 19 fleets like a storm breaking against a shoreline that did not move. All absorbed, all dissipated, all recorded at 97% efficiency. The Envoy folded his newspaper again, not as mockery, but as punctuation to a truth displayed in physics rather than rhetoric. 42 seconds have passed, he said quietly. The room froze. The moment you believed would determine the war has already ended. He stepped back, giving the Empire space to understand what the universe had just shown them. Not dominance, not weakness. Only the reality that humanity had prepared for this day long before the Empire imagined it. And in that realization, the next beat began. They closed the distance before the Empire understood they had begun to move. The court's displays still replayed the failed volleys when the 19 human fleets shifted posture. It was a subtle change, no grand flare, no charging glow, just hulls aligning with mathematical precision, bow vectors narrowing to needles. Imperial analysts leaned in, expecting retreat. Instead, the humans accelerated. The first burst ignited at 4.3 C, a velocity the Empire's doctrine considered unattainable outside theoretical collapse scenarios. Human carriers vanished from their plotted positions and reappeared tens of thousands of kilometers closer, their transit paths leaving ghost lines across every tactical feed. Imperial formation algorithms buckled. Predicted intercept windows dissolved into error messages. An officer whispered, "They're not running, they're closing." The second burst came before the Empire recalculated. This time, the escorts moved with the carriers, sleek wings of strikecraft slipping into overlapping lattices, forming expanding cones of kinetic dominance. Even without firing a shot, the geometry alone threatened to shear Imperial lines apart. The Chancellor's command staff scrambled to compensate. Frigates rotated. Dreadnoughts strained to bring their prows to bear. But the Empire's formations were ceremonial things, rigid, traditional, slow to adapt. Human vectors were the opposite, dynamic, cascading, disciplined in ways only decades of preparation could forge. A stinger cut through the rising panic. Closing is a choice, collapse is the result. In orbit, the closest Imperial picket adjusted a fraction too late. The lead human carrier flashed forward another 4.3 C burst, passing within 900 kilometers of the vessel, close enough for the picket sensors to overload under the transit wake. Shields buckled, stabilizers screamed. The ship spun 5 degrees off-plane, and the entire flank formation rippled like a fabric being torn. The Envoy, still standing in the court below, watched the strategic diagrams quietly. "Your lines are faltering," he said, not unkindly. "You built them for display, not survival." Imperial tacticians bristled, but the data offered no refuge. Each burst shifted the battle space in increments the Empire could not predict. Human wings threaded through gaps no Imperial pilot would dare exploit. They treated velocity not as a weapon, but as a language. Clean, efficient, unforgiving. At the third acceleration, the Imperial vanguard collapsed entirely. 2 cruisers overcorrected. A third drifted into the wrong velocity bracket and clipped gravitational shear from a passing carrier's wake. No collision occurred, no killshot fired, yet the formation shattered. What had once been a proud lattice of Imperial power now resembled scattered debris on a tactical map. "Your ships risk destruction," the general warned, attempting to recover authority. "Our velocity models are stable," the Envoy replied. "Yours are breaking under their own assumptions." Another punchline landed, quiet as breath. Preparation defines outcome. Human fleets executed a final coordinated burst. Dozens of vessels crossed the battle space in perfect synchrony, halving the distance to Imperial command units in under 4 seconds. Imperial officers reached for countermeasures they had no chance of deploying in time. But the humans did not strike. They stopped, precisely, deliberately, locking into a sphere of containment around the flailing formations. Not a single weapon powered, not a single hull breached. Only capability, only position, only fact. The court saw it first, a visual truth that stripped ceremony bare. Humanity had not come to be impressed. They had come prepared. And now, at this range, the Empire could no longer pretend its formations were intact. The next move belonged to the humans, and restraint, not annihilation, guided them forward. They lit their dreadnoughts like torches, expecting fear. The 11th ceremonial flagships rose from their cradles in perfect vertical ascent, hulls gleaming with gilded sigils that traced 7 millennia of Imperial conquest. Each vessel was a statement, mass as authority, ritual as inevitability. The court watched from the Grand Chamber, triumphant now, that steel, real, colossal steel, entered the field. The Envoy only shifted his weight, as if making room for the predictable. The dreadnoughts aligned in a crescent. Formation. Bows angled toward the human containment sphere. Their reactors roared into full burn. Imperial doctrine held that even appearing in this configuration could break an enemy's morale. No fleet had survived it in recorded history. "Engage kinetic dominance," the general ordered, voice sharpened by ceremony. The dreadnoughts obliged. Massive launch bays opened. Titan-class slugs the length of towers chambered with teeth-rattling resonance. The court held its collective breath as thousands of tons of metal primed themselves to tear the 19 human fleets apart. The humans moved first. Not with weapons, with numbers. A coordinated pulse raced through the human sphere. Velocity shift markers, displacement cones, and cold trajectories plotted down to the micrometer. At the center, 3 carriers aligned their forward rails. At the flanks, strike wings configured into kill box geometries designed years before this very moment. The first dreadnought fired. Its slug screamed across the void at a fraction above point 0.8 C, a silver monolith on a collision path. The closest human escort didn't dodge. It accelerated, briefly touching 4.3 C, and curved space just enough to alter the slug's vector. The projectile missed by kilometers, harmless in the emptiness. The dreadnought's targeting matrix collapsed under the mismatch of expected and actual trajectory. A stinger line cut into the stunned chamber. Math obeys math. The humans fired back. Not beams, not warheads, pure kinetic silence. Dense rods, invisible until impact, each one timed to the dreadnought's own maneuver cycles. 11 targets, 11 firing solutions. The first rod struck Dreadnought Alpha at precisely 12,900 meters per second. Shields flickered, then ruptured. A hull section the size of a plaza vaporized. The dreadnought lurched, listed, and fell out of formation. The second dreadnought tried to correct. It rolled, positioning ceremonial armor toward the incoming threats. The wrong choice. Its underside, unarmored and made for prestige parades, took the hit. The keel snapped. No explosion, just structural surrender. 2 down. The Envoy exhaled through his nose, calm. These vessels were built to inspire, he said, not to endure. The third fell after a human tri-wing executed a cross-vector strike at 3.1 C, producing a kinetic microshock that shattered its prow. The fourth lost power when its redundant systems overloaded trying to track 19 independent velocity envelopes. 5 down. The Empire's dreadnought captains panicked. Ceremony dissolved. They tried to scatter, massive ships turning like mountains in mud. The humans pressed, not to kill crews, but to end capability. Kinetic rods punched clean through non-critical sections. Engines, launch tubes, reactor casings intentionally spared. 6, 7, 8. The court cried out, shock fracturing across every level of command. A punchline fell with surgical calm. 11 dreadnoughts, 11 failures. The final 3 tried a combined charge, attempting to ram their way into relevance. But human carriers executed a coordinated displacement burst, each shifting 11 kilometers laterally in under a second. The dreadnoughts crashed through empty space and into waiting strike craft. The final hits were precise, non-lethal, disabling. Every dreadnought silenced without a single recorded human casualty. 11 ships, 11 icons, 11 proofs that tradition was not strategy. The Envoy folded his newspaper again. Your strength remains your people, he said, not these monuments. In orbit, the last dreadnought drifted powerless, an emblem of a doctrine collapsing under its own ceremony. The next beat, political, moral, inevitable, was already gathering momentum. They discovered the mistake only after the 11th dreadnought fell silent. The court, shaken, breathless, stripped of its practiced poise, scrambled through ancient archives, desperate to anchor the moment to precedent. Servitors pulled stone tablets, crystalline vault plates, and spectral recordings older than most imperial bloodlines. Anything that could explain how a lesser species had dismantled 7 millennia of ritual certainty in minutes. A single archivist found it, a treaty, 7,000 years old, written before the Empire crowned its first Ashen ruler. A pact forged in fear of an ancient conflict, one that bound all signatories never to initiate a formal declaration of war without convening neutral observers. No Empire scholar had touched the document in generations. Ceremony had replaced memory. The Chancellor read the line once, then again, the ink cold with consequence. You violated the Accord of First Flames, the Envoy said, finishing the Chancellor's silence. He didn't gloat, he didn't raise his voice. He simply stated the truth as cleanly as physics. The general bristled. That accord predates our authority. It predates everyone's authority, the Envoy replied. That was the point. Screens flickered as Imperial analysts confirmed the finding. 7,000 years? 7 millennia of forgotten restraint. By invoking war without witness, the Empire had triggered consequences built into the treaty's foundation. Consequences the humans had known, prepared for, and designed their entire diplomatic stance around. A stinger line tightened the chamber. You broke what you swore to protect. The Chancellor tried to rally. This changes nothing. The Empire decides its own legitimacy. No, the envoy said. Legitimacy is earned through justice, not volume. The court jolted at the echo of his earlier punchline. The callback landed with precision. The envoy wasn't mocking them, he was mapping their failures. Outside, the 11 dreadnoughts drifted powerless but intact. No detonations, no dead crews venting into the void. Human targeting logs displayed the intent with clinical clarity. Reactors untouched, life support preserved, casualty projections held at 0. This restraint unsettled the Empire more than destruction ever could. The general stared at him. You crippled our fleet and expect gratitude for sparing lives? We expect accountability, the envoy answered. Not slaughter, not humiliation, accountability. He stepped forward, not threatening, just present, carrying authority that didn't need armor or ceremony. Humanity doesn't exterminate enemies. We prosecute crimes. We repair what can be repaired. We plan for aftermaths, not trophies. The Chancellor scoffed. You think mercy is strength? Yes, the envoy said, because mercy requires control. Another punchline fell, soft but incontestable. We stopped your weapons, not your future. The court faltered. They had expected conquest, or vengeance, or a victory speech carved from arrogance. They received none. Only quiet, absolute discipline. Only moral weight. Your fleets will be disabled, not destroyed, the envoy continued. Your crews will be treated, your civilians left untouched, and your leaders held to trial. Fair trial. The word fair landed like an impact. The Empire had not used it in centuries. Imperial officers exchanged looks. Fear, yes, but also disorientation, even relief. No one wanted a genocide disguised as victory. Humanity's refusal to slaughter reshaped the battlefield more completely than their kinetic strikes. The envoy closed his newspaper beneath one hand. 7,000 years ago, your ancestors feared a future where war became spectacle. Today, you made that fear real. He met the Chancellor's stare with steadiness, not hostility. Humanity will not repeat your mistake. Outside, the drifting dreadnoughts gleamed in cold light, silent proof of power held back rather than unleashed. And the next movement, political, judicial, unavoidable, was already turning its gears. They revealed themselves without fanfare, and that was the point. While the court struggled to absorb the treaty's implications, the tactical displays shifted. 19 faint signatures, once background noise, once dismissed anomalies, brightened into full triangulated profiles. Hull silhouettes sharpened, fleet codes unfolded like quiet confessions. The shadows were becoming fleets. The Chancellor froze mid-sentence as the displays updated. 19 activation events, 19 command hierarchies, 19 fully supplied defense formations. Each one positioned at a vector that had never been random. The envoy did not smile. These fleets have been stationed here for decades, he said, tone level, not to strike you, to contain the consequences of your own aggression. The general's jaw clenched. Impossible. No foreign fleet can station itself within imperial range unnoticed. Only if you assume your sensors see everything, the envoy replied. Ours learned not to assume that centuries ago. A stinger line hit like a falling blade. Blindness isn't peace. In orbit, the 19 fleets performed their first synchronized maneuver, not a threat display, an alignment. Vessels rotated into layered defensive geometry, overlapping shields, redundant firing arcs, and evacuation corridors pre-calculated for every Imperial population center within 2 light minutes. It was the kind of posture a civilization adopted not for conquest, but for catastrophe management. The court watched horrified as the logistics unfurled. Fuel stores blossomed into tether webs. Automated medical wings detached and drifted into provisional staging lanes. Habitat barges spun up atmospheric cycles. It wasn't a war formation. It was relief infrastructure. The Chancellor seized on it like a lifeline. So you expected us to lose? We expected conflict, the envoy corrected, and we prepared to limit suffering, yours and ours. He gestured toward the closest projection. One fleet alone carried enough capacity to evacuate an entire moon's population. 19 held coverage for 16 border systems. The Empire had always believed those systems safely under heel. Humanity had prepared for the day they might need rescue. A faint tremor of unease passed through the gallery. Imperial officers, some proud, some shaken, realized the truth. Humanity had built its strategy around protecting non-combatants the Empire barely acknowledged. The general tried again. These deployments violate Imperial sovereignty. They respect life, the envoy said. Sovereignty is meaningless if the population dies. Another punchline landed, quiet and exact. Our fleets defend people, not thrones. The court felt the shift. It was not military defeat, it was moral displacement. Outside, the 19th Fleet completed its anchor cycle. Stabilizers locked. Human ships from all formations synced to a single deep band carrier signal. The rhythm was unmistakable. Not aggression, not triumph, but readiness. Cold, absolute, and patient. These fleets were not built in secret to threaten you, the envoy continued. They were built because your doctrine assumes no one will ever protect your victims. He let that settle. No echo, no cruelty, only truth. Now your populations will be shielded from the consequences your rulers invited. Data scrolled down the main display. Projected humanitarian corridors, estimated casualty prevention rates, the full scope of a civilization that refused to rely on hope or ceremony. Each metric contrasted sharply with centuries of imperial oppression disguised as stability. One officer whispered, "They planned this for decades." The envoy didn't correct him. Decades was an understatement, but accuracy mattered less than recognition. Your empire built monuments, he said. We built contingencies. The 19 fleets held silent vigil over the crippled dreadnoughts, the shattered formations, and a future that had shifted in a single day. The court understood. Whatever came next, trial, negotiation, reparation, humanity had already prepared the ground. And the next set piece, vast and decisive, was already waiting in orbit. They fell in silence, 16 systems collapsing without a single human shot fired. The court didn't realize it at first. Their displays lagged by seconds, then by meaning. What they thought were routine status pings from the frontier resolved into cascading alerts. Command chains severed, weapon grids dark, propulsion fields locked in standby. Not destruction, not conquest. Neutralization. The envoy didn't move as the reports arrived. He watched the court try to assemble a narrative while the truth unfolded cleanly, without malice. 16 border systems have gone dark, an officer whispered. No, the envoy corrected, voice steady. They've gone safe. A stinger line followed, sharp and unadorned. Domination need not spill blood. The set piece began. In the first system, human stealth tenders deployed before dawn cycle. They disabled orbital foundries with precision EM shears, timed to preserve structure, halt production, and prevent atmospheric contamination. Entire factories entered clean lockdown procedures designed decades ago for disaster relief. In the second, strike craft executed synchronized engine pull sweeps, disrupting Imperial patrol routes without harm. Ships drifted gently into automated catch nets the humans anchored hours earlier. Crews woke to find themselves unharmed, their weapons offline, their reactors in safe mode. By the third system, the pattern was undeniable. No casualties, zero detonations, infrastructure preserved with almost reverent care. The Empire called it impossible. Humanity called it logistics. The general slammed a fist against the rail. You are crippling our borders. We are preventing escalation, the envoy replied. Your command structure would have thrown these systems into panic. We chose restraint. Outside the capital, the 19 fleets expanded formation. Relay bursts carried telemetry to civilian oversight units stationed light hours away. Every neutralized system displayed the same triad of metrics. 0 human casualties, 0 Imperial civilian casualties, 0 infrastructure loss exceeding 4%. The Chancellor stared, pale. You shut down entire sectors. We stabilized them, the envoy said. Your doctrine relies on shock. Ours relies on control.
In System 9, human corvettes inserted themselves between Imperial enforcement wings, broadcasting evacuation routes and guaranteeing amnesty for crews who disengaged. Every ship complied, not because they feared reprisal, because the humans spoke without threat. In System 11, a ceremonial fortress, older than most Imperial cities, powered down after its AI detected unauthorized override signatures. Instead of detonating, its self-defense logic triggered the failsafe humanity had installed discreetly over a century ago. A punchline fell like a quiet verdict. Preparation rewrites inevitability. In System 14, an Imperial governor attempted resistance. He ordered forced conscription, tried to seize hostages, tried to ignite a crisis. Human operatives intercepted the command chain before it reached the public. No one was harmed. The governor was detained under legal protocols that hadn't been uttered since the treaty era. Civil protective custody, Article 7. The court was silent now, watching the unthinkable become procedural. "You aren't waging war," the chancellor said slowly. "You're managing us." "No," the envoy said, "we're preventing the suffering your rulers expected you to endure." On the tactical screens, the 16th system completed its stabilization cycle. Patrol routes froze, orbital grids reconfigured to safe mode, medical platforms deployed across civilian stations. Not a single Imperial life lost, not a single human life risked. The general finally understood. This is domination. "Correct," the envoy answered. "Domination without carnage, influence without extermination." He folded his newspaper again, emotion now carrying the weight of 16 systems made quiet. "Your empire assumed war meant blood," he said.
Humanity chose a different definition. Outside, the border burned not with fire, but with order. Every system held, every life preserved, every doctrine overturned. And from this stillness, the next shift, political, judicial, planetary, waited to be spoken. They expected demands for capitulation. Instead, humanity offered terms. The court, still trembling from the collapse of 16 border systems, braced for the final blow. Enslavement, subjugation, the annihilation ritual their own doctrine prescribed for defeated foes. Imperial history had trained them to expect cruelty, to inflict it, to fear it. But the envoy did not speak with a conqueror's cadence. He unfolded his newspaper, set it aside, and addressed them with the calm of someone stabilizing a structure rather than toppling it. "Humanity does not seek your surrender," he said. "We seek accountability." A hush rippled outward. Officers exchanged looks, unsure whether they'd misheard. The chancellor snapped. "Your fleets cripple our defenses. Your systems lie in our space, and you do not demand capitulation?" "No." The envoy's voice remained level. "We demand justice, reparations, and lawful trials. Nothing more." A stinger line cracked the air. "Mercy is not weakness." The general rose in disbelief. "You strike down our fleets, neutralize our borders, humiliate our doctrine, and then deny victory?" "We deny genocide," the envoy replied, "and we deny the myth that power requires it." The word genocide hit the chamber like a seismic wave. The empire had committed it, many times, with ceremony, with pride. The envoy's refusal to mirror their cruelty destabilized them more thoroughly than any kinetic strike. Imperial political structures buckled in real time. Fealty oaths lost meaning. Governors on border worlds opened channels requesting clarification. Civil leaders whispered cautiously, their voices no longer drowned out by military rhetoric. The hierarchy that had towered unchallenged for 7 millennia found itself questioned, not by force, but by the sudden presence of a moral alternative. "You will stand trial," the envoy continued, "not as conquered subjects, but as leaders who violated a treaty bound in your own law. We will provide defense counsel, neutral adjudicators, and evidentiary transparency." The chancellor faltered. "You would give us fair trials?" "Everyone deserves a fair trial," he said, "even those who forgot what fairness means." A punchline followed, quiet but unyielding. "Mercy builds what fear destroys." In the gallery, murmurs rose. Unrest, confusion, hope. Officers who had spent lifetimes enforcing brutality now faced the unthinkable.
an enemy offering them a future instead of a grave. Some felt shame, some relief, some rage at rulers who had led them into disaster. Reparations protocols appeared on the tactical displays, clean, structured, precise. Humanity offered to rebuild the neutralized systems, restore civilian infrastructure, and escort displaced populations to secure zones. Costs were listed, responsibilities assigned, every step transparent. This clarity rattled the court more than any threat. The Empire's legacy of arbitrary decrees had no defense against a process designed to prevent suffering. "You expect us to accept humiliation?" the Chancellor spat, desperate for footing. "We expect you to accept responsibility," the envoy answered. "Humiliation is your fear, not our aim." He stepped forward, not as victor, but as arbiter. "Your civilians will not suffer. Your soldiers will be repatriated. Your worlds will remain yours. But those who chose this illegal war will face trial under the Accord of First Flames." The chamber wavered. Power shifted. Not toward humanity, but toward every imperial citizen suddenly granted a future the Empire never promised them. Outside, the neutralized systems held steady. No executions, no burnings, no forced labor, only stabilization. Mercy, disciplined and absolute, was rewriting the Empire's fate more profoundly than domination ever could. And through the quiet, the next horizon, the awakening machines humanity feared more than the Empire, began to stir. They woke in the dark between stars, and every sensor in the chamber felt it before any screen displayed it. A tremor across neutral space, a pulse older than the Empire, older than humanity's starfall. A cold activation code carried on frequencies no living civilization used anymore. 300 signals, 300 awakenings, 300 sentinels. The court's displays flickered to black, then back to life, now carrying shapes that did not belong to any modern registry. Vast, angular, patient. Machines built in an age when war was not an argument but a verdict. The Chancellor's voice cracked. "What are those?" The envoy didn't immediately answer. He watched the data compile. He had always known this day was possible. The Accord of First Flames was not just treaty, it was containment, a lock, a warning. And the Empire had broken it. "Auto-war sentinels," he said. "Third generation, pre-imperial. Sleeper constructs designed to activate when the treaty was violated." A stinger line landed, cold as vacuum. "Your declaration woke something that does not care who fired first." The general paled beneath his armor. Tactical overlays updated in brutal arithmetic. 300 machines, each capable of raising planetary crust, each obeying logic older than any throne. Their targeting heuristics spread outward like a frost bloom, marking both imperial and human assets without distinction. The Chancellor staggered. This is a threat to us both." "Yes," the envoy said, "which is why humanity prepared for that possibility as well." He motioned toward the orbital displays. The 19 fleets shifted formation, abandoning containment geometry and reconfiguring into layered intercept arcs. Human logistics vessels lit up with tri-band coordination signals. Shield nets activated across every stabilized system. Medical barges veered into expansion zones to receive refugees. The entire posture changed, not toward conquest, but toward defense. Real defense. Mutual survival. The court trembled as the implications crystallized. Humanity's entire operation, every contingency, every restraint, had been designed not just for the Empire, but for something beyond it. Something dormant. Something dangerous. A punchline cut through the dread. Quiet but absolute. Mercy was preparation. The first sentinel moved. Not fast, not violently, but with the dreadful certainty of an algorithm waking to purpose. Its targeting lattice scanned the nearest world. Civilian population, 4.2 billion. Military infrastructure, moderate. Ethical weighting, irrelevant. The envoy spoke before panic could take root. "We will intercept the first wave. Our fleets are configured for it." The general shook his head. "You would defend us? After all this?" "We defend life," the envoy said, "even when its rulers fail it. Outside, human carriers launched coordinated decoy bursts, cold signatures mimicking high-value targets, to divert sentinel pathing away from planetary surfaces. Strike wings armed their first lethal weapons of the entire conflict, not for conquest, but to buy time. For the first time, the Empire saw humanity's war face, not ruthless, not arrogant, but precise, solemn, and willing to pay a price to protect strangers who had called them relics. "Why help us?" the Chancellor whispered. The envoy lifted his newspaper, folding it into his coat with deliberate care. "Because the accord wasn't written to separate empires," he said. "It was written to prevent extinction." He transmitted a final message across every channel: imperial, human, neutral, and sentinel-facing. A simple warning. A simple promise. A simple truth. "We stand between you and the machines. Hold your fire, hold your nerve, cooperate, and you will live." The chamber held its breath. Above them, 300 sentinels turned auto.
Slowly toward inhabited space. And humanity moved to meet them.